All right, my friends, we're going to get going and I'll let people in as they come in. Welcome, everybody. This is so fun. Good to see your faces. This is hopefully you're in the right place. You're not waiting for like your driver's license to get renewed or something like that. When we did that, it took about 7 years when we got our real ID. So hopefully you're not doing that. This is the learning lab called Learning to See, Understanding Inclusion and Confirmation Bias. And what I'd like to do just to start is if you could turn on your video, if you don't mind doing that, and then going around the horn and just saying your name and where you live, and then just one thing you're hoping for tonight. Okay. Whoever can start. So looking for your name, where you live, and then one thing you're hoping to get out of tonight.
You want us just to talk and say it, Steve? Not
Absolutely. Yeah. Please talk. Don't chat. Talk.
okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Go for it if you're ready.
So I'm Jim Shoddy, and I live in Maple Grove. And in some ways, Holly and I are new to the church, but we're really happy to be here. And so like we know everybody from afar. Welcome to COVID, right? But we're I'm tonight. I'm just really excited about. I don't know. I think, to people, I come across as this guy that's kind of open, and they'll share stuff with me, and inside I'm like, I wish you wouldn't have said that, because and I want to be that guy. I portray that guy, but in reality, my lanes are a lot narrower than I want them to be. And that's why I'm glad I'm at Genesis, because my lanes are going to get wider. They need to be. And so I hope tonight just to learn and do the baby steps to start doing that. I want to learn.
Fantastic, Jim. Thank you so much, my friend. That's beautiful.
I'm Steve Shawning. We live in Brooklyn Center. Lived in Brooklyn Center in North Minneapolis for 44 years.
Big number.
Big number. I was 22 years old when I bought a house in North Minneapolis, and we've lived in Brooklyn Center ever since. And so we've lived in some of the most diverse areas in the metro. And I've also worked in industrial factory work, and done essentially worked with multicultural people since I graduated from high school. And what else? What else are we talking about? What are we trying to get out of this? Well, community. But here's Joan.
I could have answered for you. I'm kind of good at it. I'm Joan. It's if you're offering it, we want to be there.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve and Joan. Love you guys.
I'm Linda, and I live in Brooklyn Park, and I'm curious and just want to learn more.
Thanks, Linda.
Hey, everybody. I'm Todd, and I live in Columbia Heights. And historically, especially like from like a church and biblical perspective, I've had a very probably exclusionary view that has started to evolve and change over maybe the last 2 or 3 years, especially. And so I'm just here to try and continue to open my mind and continue to evolve and learn more and just be more accepting in general, and see how the Bible can support that as opposed to combat that.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd. I love that.
I can go. My name is Andy. I think I know like 2 of you, so this is fun. I live in North Minneapolis, and I guess really similar to Todd. Similar upbringing, but in the last however many years, it's been expanded for sure. And I'm just looking to be proven right tonight. So
Yes, we all are. Thanks, Andy. That's awesome. Oh gosh. You just taught the whole class right there.
but no, I think it's going to be great to, yeah, right. You're welcome.
I'll go ahead. I'm Will. I live in Northeast Minneapolis, and I am here tonight because I need some intellectual and social stimulation, and Allie volunteered to do all of bedtime. So here we are.
Well, I can go. I'm Pam. I live in Robbinsdale, and I was going to say something else, but Will, that idea of just a little mental and intellectual stimulation, conversation with others, if I'm honest, that's probably the biggest reason. But you also had me at learning to see. I just need more of that.
Thank you, Pam.
And I am Rebecca. I live in St. Louis Park. And I think I know who I want to be, like the kind of person I want to be, the kind of person I maybe think I am. I don't know. But I guess I want to be a learner. Like, it's one thing to like think about who I want to be or talk to other people about that or read cool quotes on, social media. And it's another thing to like get into it and be a learner and actually kind of put my money where my mouth is a little bit. So I think it's time to just like dig in a little deeper to some of it.
Thanks, Reeves. Well, I'm Steve. I live in Maple Grove, and I am here. This topic is something I'm so fascinated by, excited about, and eager to dive into over the next 3 weeks. I've been really excited just to talk and have conversations tonight. And so I'm going to share the screen again because there is a PowerPoint deck that I think is going to be helpful to move through, which I can share with you later if you want it. We're also recording this, so if you want to, dive into it again, you can certainly do that. But let me share my screen, and then I'll give you a little bit of an update on where we're going to go tonight, and then where we're going to go for the next 2 weeks. So tonight's topic is people can't see what they can't see. Hi, Eleanor. Oh my goodness. It's so good to see you. Hi, Eleanor. People can't see what they can't see. So we're going to get into the basics of confirmation bias, why reasonable people still get caught being blind to certain things, even though we want to see more, like Jim was saying. And then the next week, next Tuesday, we're going to talk about including and transcending. When we expand and grow, we don't graduate or we don't leave behind the things that we used to believe or think. We actually bring them along with. We include them, but we transcend them. We're no longer limited by them. So that gets us out of the trap of thinking that we just get better and better than the other guys, So that's an important thing. And then the last one, seeing growth as stages or faith stages versus finish lines. I think we get into a lot of trouble when we talk about inclusion, but we act like everyone else who doesn't think like us has not finished the race like we have yet. So it's going to be fun. There's going to be some interaction in breakout rooms. There's going to be some teaching. And I encourage everyone should be able to unmute themselves. That you already have. So if you have a question, just go ahead and say, hey, Steve, I have a question, and just interrupt me. Okay. I won't be able to see your hand because I can't see everybody with the screen share, but just interrupt me. Okay. And I would love to just stop and then we'll go from there. And we're going to have a hard stop at 8:30. All right. So I promise that. Everyone's got shows to watch or a glass of wine to have or whatever. So, and if you already are having your glass of wine, that's fine too. All right. So here we go. In John 9, we have to start with a little scripture study, don't we, you guys? Oh my goodness. I mean, Rick Patton's not here, but we still have to. In John 9, we read these couple of verses. As he walked along, Jesus saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that this man was born blind? So don't use the chat, use your voices. What questions do you have when you read those two verses?
They assume it was sin.
Say it again.
Why did they assume it was sin?
Thank you, Joan. That's a great question. Why did they assume it was sin? I mean, there's only one, there's two options there. It's either him or his parents, but it's definitely sin. Why? That's such a great question. What else?
Is there anything in the Old Testament about laws or purity rituals or something that we're missing of why they're asking this question?
That might lead us to believe that something the Bible says,
Right.
that it's because of sin. What a great question. I'm not sure the answer to that, Will, but it's a fantastic question. They were trained somehow in some way. That belief that someone's born blind because of sin doesn't come out of thin air, right? It comes from somewhere. I love that. By the way, hello, Michelle, and possibly Enoch just joining us. Maybe it's just Michelle. Michelle, is it mom night tonight? Hopefully it is. That means that Enoch's got the kids. Okay. What other questions come up for you guys as you read these two?
So this is maybe more of a noticing
Yeah, perfect.
than a question, but their first instinct is to figure out who's at fault rather than, I mean, hasn't he been, I don't know the timing of this versus the rest of the Gospels, but hasn't he been healing people? Like, why is that where they go first?
Pam, that's such a great noticing. This is John chapter 9. And so, and John kicks right in. I mean, by the time we get to John chapter 4, he's doing the miracle of turning the water into wine. And, in John 5, John 6, I mean, there's lots of people that have already been healed. You might wonder what's wrong with these guys that they're still asking these dumb questions. But again, the frame of reference is hard to let go of, right? They're coming in with the frame of reference. They're coming in with a confirmation bias. And we're wondering,
What kind of sin could the man have done at birth to be blind at birth?
Linda Amos, what a perfect question, right? And let's not answer it, but what? Is there a kind of generational sin that would penalize the son or the grandson? But even if it was, then that's not his sin, right? So how is someone born? How does someone sin before they were born? That's a frame of reference.
I'm also just curious. I mean, reading it very literally, if they were just walking along, how would they know he was blind from birth compared to, I don't know. So like, is this somebody they already knew? Like, it's a small town and we kind of know this guy and his story. And what does that mean about what else they think about him? I don't know.
Rebecca, that's a great question. And what you're doing is you're reminding us that this is a story that's being told. This isn't someone's journal that we're reading in real time, like here we go, like someone's, it's a story that's intentionally being told in an intentional spot in the book of John by someone about someone for a reason. And so a detail, so you're basically asking, why did they know this detail? They shouldn't know the detail. If they didn't know the person, they wouldn't know the detail, but they do know the detail. So why?
So does that mean that they knew him?
It certainly might. They might have passed this guy 100 times. Jesus didn't travel very far from where he grew up, and from where he lived. So it's very possible that they did know him. What other questions or comments or noticings?
My question, I guess, was kind of along the same line. There's that last one is just, what additional details are not shared here, that we would know, or that, are just left out for whatever reason, that as they pass by, is there something else that's cluing them into why they would ask about the sin, or that they would know that he was, blind?
Okay.
What else is there that we don't see or hear?
Exactly. Right. What else is there that we don't see? So, okay. My question was this, you guys. Why does the story start that way? And remembering, Rebecca reminded us this is a story that's told in an intentional way, and it could have been started a number of ways. But Todd, you basically leapt the tall building in a single bound by saying, basically, this story is about what can you see and what can't you see. And even the detail about this man was born blind. How do we know that? How can we see that? That's a question we have to ask. And so a couple of you guys noticed that, like, hey, I'm from sort of conservative backgrounds and biblically, and I want to know how the biblical witness maybe even points toward inclusion rather than exclusion. And one of the ways you get there is by simply, when you approach a story, before you get too far, you start to ask those questions, right? You have to really plumb the depths, and it doesn't take that much time. And we just took 5 or 10 minutes, and we raised all these beautiful questions. Why do they know that the man's born blind? Do they know this person? Do they not know this person? Why does the story start that way? And if you know the story, it goes on in a pretty fascinating way. In fact, here's my big, huge Bible with large print for real, because I'm 50. And if you have a Bible or a phone, I want to invite you to actually turn to John chapter 9. We're not going to spend a million hours in this, but we're going to spend enough time to get into, I think, some of the juice that's going to set up inclusion and confirmation bias. Okay, so I'm just going to start reading parts of it to you. Okay, and when you get to a point where you have a question or a comment, just interrupt me and I'll stop. Okay, so I'm going to start. This is John chapter 9. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. John's the fourth gospel. As he walked along, Jesus saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed.
Pause.
Okay.
They
Go
never
ahead.
sinned, ever.
See?
He just says full blanket statement. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. They were sinless,
Right?
completely.
Neither this man nor his parents sinned. What are you seeing, Will? What are you reacting to? I love it.
Like, it's such a broad blanket statement.
Yes.
And like the Romans road in me is like, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
We got to start with sin.
Sin is death, And like, I don't know, it's just odd that Jesus is saying about this guy, like, he and his parents did not sin.
I know. It's fun. It's fun. It's a fun noticing. And then he just kind of blows right by as if that's not going to be a bomb, you know? He
Yeah.
just drops that bomb and then keeps going. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. Now, again,
That's what I
stop.
was saying, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just seemingly, a cruelty of God, right? That this person
Yes.
be born blind so that God can work through them rather than like finding a different way to work.
Todd is bringing up a very good question. Does God have to give someone a disability in order to show God's glory? We can't. I'm not going to answer that. I'm not going to try to answer that question. But I want to say, Todd, that's a really good noticing and question, because that posture that whatever happens to you is caused by God in order for God to get glory can shut down really good conversation. It can warp people's views about God. Is God good? Is God not? The only thing I'll say about that is that it's possible that we're hearing that statement that Jesus just made through our, post-Reformation lenses and our Calvinist lenses and our, but John Piper lenses, that it might not be exactly what he is saying. But he does go on and say, we must work the works of him who sent me while it's day, because night is coming when no one can work. As long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had said this, he spat on the ground, made mud with his saliva, and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back, able to see. Now the neighbors, suddenly we have new characters. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? And some were saying, it is he. Now, again, this is a small town, probably, you guys, just a few dozen people in it. This guy would have been sitting at the gate begging every single day of their lives. Others were saying, no, but it's someone that looks like him. Okay. He kept saying, no, I am the man. But they kept asking him, how then were your eyes opened? He answered, the man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. Then I went and washed, and I received my sight. Then they said to him, where is he? And he said, I don't know. Now, we're not going to read the rest of the text, but what happens is basically the whole town gets into a huge brouhaha. The religious leaders get into it. The parents of the man get into it. The neighbors are saying, we don't even know this guy. The parents are saying, we know this is our son, but you got to ask him whether or not he was really healed of sight. This guy kept saying, Jesus did it. I don't know where Jesus is now. The religious leaders said, Jesus can't be good because he healed you on the Sabbath. Eventually, the guy gets kicked out of the community, gets kicked out. And that's where he finds Jesus, on the outskirts, on the margins of the community after he's gotten kicked out. And then in verse 35, Jesus heard that they had driven him out. And when he found him, it's interesting. Sometimes you can only be found by Jesus when you get driven out. He said, do you believe in the Son of Man? The guy answered, who is he? That should be our answer, instead of, oh yeah, I received Christ at age 4. By the way, I did receive Christ at age 4. He answered, who is he, sir? Tell me so that I may believe in him. And Jesus said to him, you have seen him. The one speaking with you is he. Now, quick question. How many times does Jesus admit who he is in the Gospels? I'm not asking for an actual answer, like 4 or 2 or whatever, but often or not often?
Rarely.
He rarely does it. But to a person whose eyes has been made whole, he does. Jesus said, I came into the world for judgment so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" And Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would not have sin." And that's how the story starts, doesn't it, Will? It's about sin. The story ends with sin, too. Jesus said, "If you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say we see, your sin remains." All right, people. Anyone recognize that guy? That beautiful man, Brian McLaren? Just such a good dude. He wrote a book called Why Don't They Get It? Overcoming Bias. I got some of the stuff from this talk from him, but here's a quote. People can't see what they can't see. Their biases get in the way, surrounding them like a high wall, trapping them in ignorance, deception, and illusion. And no amount of reasoning and argument will get through to them unless we first learn how to break the walls of bias. So let's get into what confirmation bias is. You see that beautiful Venn diagram? I love it. On the left side, there's objective facts. On the right side, there's what confirms your belief. And then there's just this little toenail clipping of a sliver of things that you actually see. You do see some objective facts, but you only see the objective facts that confirms your beliefs. Whew. So confirmation bias is the human tendency to selectively gather and process information in order to confirm our assumptions and preconceptions, whether they are true or not. It not only affects the way we gather information, but also how we process it and remember it. Has anyone ever done any studies on eyewitness accounts in terms of courts of law? And so you get one event and you get several different eyewitnesses. And what they've found is that eyewitnesses, they're there, they see it in real time. And how they recount how the thing happened is wildly different. And if you're married, you know that's true. Right? You said this. I did not say that. No, have you ever gotten to that argument with your spouse? No, you said that. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. Anyway, so in other words, we don't learn rationally. We all think that we're rational. We all think that we make our decisions based on reason and rationality, including the Christian beliefs we hold. We think that we've chosen them all instead of having been handed them down by our parents and our social structures. We think we believe that Jesus raised from the dead because we believe it, because we've found a way to really get to the truth. Instead, the way we learn is influenced by what we already know and who we are. That is confirmation bias. So take a moment to read this. This is awesome. A little clip. Right. I've heard the rhetoric from both sides. Time to do my own research, find the real truth. So you look it up on, notice it's not Google, but it's Googie. The Googie. Literally the first link that agrees with what you already believe. You click on it and then jackpot, that's it. And we all do this. We believe that only those guys do that, but we all do this. And so right now you should be asking this question. Wait a minute. I mean, I've had good arguments. I've had good debates with people. I've changed my mind. I've learned, aren't we more reasonable than that? So let's get into a little bit of why. Like, why do we get so caught in confirmation bias? Well, number one, our brains are wired up for it. Okay, so our brains are wired up dualistically. Our brains process and evaluate information efficiently by categorizing everything as either good or bad, safe or dangerous, right or wrong. And that's because it's really, I mean, in the course of like 13.9 billion years, it wasn't that long ago that our prehistoric ancestors were ambling home from work and they passed the blueberry bush and cousin Jim, the saber-toothed tiger, ate cousin Jim at the blueberry bush. And so every time now, and you heard about it, so every time you pass by a blueberry bush, what happens to your brain? your brain just shoots out a signal, danger, 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 danger. That's bad. So over the course of time, you come to believe that blueberries are bad. But it's really has nothing about blueberries. It's the saber-toothed tiger. That's the same reason why, like we got some Snickers bars. We got a box of Snickers or a bag of Snickers for, the Super Bowl thing. And but now our kids are wolfing down those Snickers bars like they're going to go out of bloom in two weeks. You know what I mean? Like, so our brains are wired up to keep us safe, to keep us connecting with what we already know, because familiar ideas, the ones that we already agree with, are easy to process. And our brain experiences these ideas as pleasure, like eating a little Snickers bar, because they confirm what we already believe, right? Pleasure, good, more please. That's what we do. And so maybe your news source is NPR, maybe your news source is Fox News. If it's Fox News, you're going to read NPR or CNN or MSNBC with severe skepticism, and vice versa. You're going to literally read like, oh, they're being biased on the other side, while you're going to read your own. You're going to go, well, that's really fair news. That's what we do. Unfamiliar ideas, ones that challenge our long-held assumptions. Those are difficult to process. Our brains experience the hard work of processing unfamiliar ideas as pain. So when I met Mary way back in 1994, you guys, we were working at Camp Chaminade up in Motley, Minnesota. Just such a great little romance. And I liked her right away. She did not like me right away. True story. She'll tell you that. But eventually I got her to run with me before the day started, right? So I could get to know her. She wouldn't go on a date. We had one, night off. She wouldn't go on a date with me, but she would run with me. And I was coming out. I had basically just become a true Christian right before that. I know that sounds funny, but that was real black and white. And in my system growing up, women were great, but they just couldn't preach or lead in the church. Well, Mary was going through a major deconstruction. She was going to Bethel at the time. And she asked me, like, what do you believe about women in ministry? And I'm 22 or whatever I was, 23. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And it's just, well, do you believe that women can preach and lead and teach? I was like, well, I don't know, the Bible, So, but I remember feeling this cognitive dissonance of, I really wanted to get to know this woman. And I also wanted to be faithful to the scriptures, because I was this new Christian. And that was a very painful series of conversations that eventually led to me changing my mind, but it took a long time. So in addition to our brains, here's the deal. We also like to fit in, right? We don't just ask if an idea seems reasonable or acceptable to us. We also, without even knowing it, instinctively ask, what will my peer group think of this idea? And what will they think of me if I accept it? Have you ever been there, you guys? You ever been there? Just right on the edge of something new. And if you're out loud about it, you're going to get punished. You're going to get kicked out. So if you voice your new ideas, you're going to stir other people's biases. This is how it works. And the disturbance will alert gatekeepers in the group to see you as a problem, a rebel, or a threat, leading to your censure and maybe even your excommunication, which is exactly what happened to the man that was born blind, right? And has that happened? Just nod your head if that's happened to you actually in your own little sphere of influence. Yeah. Everyone is nodding. Me too. Oh my gosh, it's happening right now, you guys, with the covenant. Anyway, so eventually this feeling of being out of sync may become so draining that I may have to start seeking out a new group in which to find community and belonging, a place where I won't always have to be on guard, keeping a secret, putting up a false front because of confirmation bias. Now, we want to say that we're bigger than that, we're better than that, right? We want to say, no, we can work it out. We can work out our differences. We can learn to disagree with dignity and honor. But it gets really hard, doesn't it? It gets really hard. So, remember last summer? Anyone recall last summer? Based on your point of view, your point of reference, the news sources you read, your own journey, you're going to have different questions. So as you look at these 4 questions regarding summer 2020 Minneapolis, I wonder what, just notice out loud, ask questions, make comments. But as you look at those 4 questions, what do you wonder? What do you see? What would you wonder about how confirmation bias affects your answers to those questions? I'm not saying that you should answer those questions unless you want to. But how do you think confirmation bias affects your answers to those questions?
Boy.
I can, I'll go right away, I guess. So my first response is, well, your first question is flawed because it's who murdered George Floyd. And that's, I mean, that shows my own confirmation bias right away.
Exactly, Andy. So. Thank you. Yes. Yes, that's such a great noticing. What else?
Second time at the second question, who was responsible for the destruction of property?
Yeah.
Seems like a Captain Obvious, the ones who did it. However, the way the question is phrased, it implies that we're going to blame somebody else.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. So good, Joan. What else? What do you notice? What do you wonder about? Does anyone have a reaction that feels, ooh, snap?
Well, being a white guy, I hit on the one, what is white privilege? I wonder how I'd see that if I wasn't a white guy.
Yeah, right. I sometimes get defensive when I see those 2 words.
Yeah, very much.
You know? Yeah. What else?
Well, the 4th question, it doesn't ask, do you believe that Black Lives Matter? And so it gets to more the support of an organization than the belief of a concept.
Yes. Great noticing, Pam. And even in that, what is it? Is it trying to pin you down? Is it trying to make something more, I don't know. Yeah, like, does that make you feel a certain way? And Pam, you can answer, or anyone else can answer too. We all affect it.
I was just noticing there's implicit bias in the question.
Exactly.
I think as I read all of them and just even like really kind of put my head back in that one summer, I tend to be a slow processor.
Yeah.
And based on friends and family and social media and just people in my direct close sphere, there was a lot of loud voices. And I just it was like, I think I know what I believe. I think I know how you know, like what I would answer, how I would answer these, but there were so many loud voices that I found myself feeling almost like confused, like I didn't know what I actually maybe thought.
Yeah.
And, you know, God bless, as an Enneagram 1, I see questions and I'm like, I would like to get the answers right. Which, like, you know,
Yes.
not even right the point. But
thank you, Rebecca. I think many of us experience that. The cacophony of voices, feeling like I should think a certain way. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't know. Do I have time to work it out, or do I have to figure out what I think right now, you know, in a social media size soundbite so that everyone can know that I'm, you know, against this or for that?
and I guess one more quick thing, like exactly that. And I want it to, like, I know deep inside me, I want it to be about so much more than that. Like so much more than that. And it's hard to get like still enough sometimes and clear enough to really like get to the real thing that I really believe in or whatever. So
Thanks for bringing that up, Rebecca. I think one of the things that is inherent in the story we read in John 9. Now, they have all this weird debate, you know, that if you read the whole story, maybe most of you maybe know it, but it just goes so back and forth, you know. But on the good side, at least they're having that conversation in person, in real time. They're taking time to do it. I think one of the things that really confounds confirmation bias these days, if our brains are already wired up to be efficient and to categorize things as right or wrong, safe or dangerous, good or bad, we're getting bombarded with so much information these days through every different news source. There's 24-hour news cycle that I think we just get paralyzed. Like, to your point of, I don't know what I think. And we want to embrace the bigger thing, the thing underneath the thing. You know, that's what we want to talk about. But we get so hijacked by all the, I mean, I watched the 13-minute video today of that the prosecutors put together of the riots, and I just got all stirred up, you know. And then I thought, I gotta lead a class tonight. What am I doing? You know, this is crazy. And so I bring up our summer in Minneapolis because we'll be working that through for a long time, you know, and it already feels like a long time ago, doesn't it? I mean, that's what's weird. So, okay. So, what I want to do now is just breathe for a second. I'm going to break you out into a couple different breakout rooms. We'll just spend 5 or 6 minutes, okay? We won't spend forever, but we've been talking about confirmation bias now for 45 minutes. Just using your own words, stories, or descriptions, describe how you understand confirmation bias, okay? So I'm going to stop the screen share. I'm going to get us out into breakout rooms. How many people are here? 12. Okay. We'll do 4 breakout rooms. We'll do 3 breakout rooms. We're gonna do 3 breakout rooms. We'll take 5 or 6 minutes. I'll repeat the question in the chat, you guys, but it's basically in using your own words, stories, or descriptions, describe how you understand confirmation bias. If you don't like that question, you can comment on something else, something that you're dying to say. Okay, that's fine too. And then I'll give you a 1-minute warning when it's time to come back in. Okay, so here we go. You guys must have been having some good conversations.
Get all the right answers.
Some of you guys got kicked out of your breakouts back into the big room. You're like, no. Others of you I know were like, oh my God, breakouts? No, I wasn't prepared for a breakout. Well, does one person want to share something that was shared in their group that felt like, oh, that's so great, that was so helpful?
I like what can you hear me, Steve?
Yeah.
I just like what Rebecca and Andy were saying about, we just they're like so wrong. It's like, what? And we're like so right. So you just write them off like really fast.
Yeah.
And it's the right thing to do. Write them off. They're
Write 'em
just too
off.
far out there.
They're not worth your time.
Not even, no,
Yep.
not even worth it.
Yeah. And it's funny, we get so offended when people write us off, right? They don't give us the benefit of the doubt. I mean, come on. What are they, monsters? You know? Oh, that's so good. Okay, I'm going to share the screen again if I can find it. So the question has to be, because we're not just going to talk about what bias is, how do we move beyond our confirmation biases and towards true inclusion? I say true inclusion there because I think, selective inclusion is sort of our favorite thing. We want to include the people we want to include and exclude the people that we want to exclude. We can feel real good about how inclusive we are about the people that we want to include. And, just like Jim said, write off everyone else. So, of course, that leads us, obviously, you guys all saw this coming, to Claudius Ptolemy, around, nice 2nd century philosopher, astronomer, and he believed that the Earth is the immovable, fixed center of the universe. It's called the geocentric view of the solar system.
I thought maybe you had to go back that far to find someone who wasn't biased.
Oh, that's so good, Pam. Pam for the win. Someone get Pam some rabbi points, some Torah points. That's so good.
But apparently not because of what you just said about what he believed. So.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So, and this was not only the scientific view, you guys, but this was the religious view. I mean, this is what the Bible taught. There's verses that, say the stars were stretched out like a canopy above the earth, so that, proves that the earth is the center of everything. And so good old Ptolemy and his geocentric, earth-centric model of the universe was uncontested for 1,300 years. That's what we all believed was absolute and utter truth, scientifically and biblically, until, of course, our good friend Nicholas Copernicus came up with a different view. Now, here's what's fascinating. It says there he died in 1543. He wrote a book where he put out his findings, which we'll see in the next slide, the heliocentric view of the universe, which is the Earth is just one of the planets that rotates around the sun. But he was so terrified to put out his view that he only put out his book right before he died. In fact, he held his book in his hands for the first time the day he died. That was how terrified he was to put forth this view. So his view is the one that looks really orderly, with the sun in the middle and the Earth and Jupiter and Saturn and all the other planets making an orderly, procession around the sun. And then, of course, on the right, you have the Earth right there in the middle, the geocentric, which everyone believed was absolutely true, and sort of sort of a chaotic view of how planets kind of orbit around in a certain way, and especially the sun. We knew the sun must orbit around the Earth because of seasons and daylight and all that stuff. But it's really fascinating, because you have to ask the question, when his view, the heliocentric view, finally became really accepted, of course it took time. The question is, what changed? Well, nothing changed. Reality didn't change. The sun was never orbiting around the Earth. That's just the construction of reality that we built in order to understand reality. That's as far as we could take it, right? What Copernicus did is he changed how we see reality from geocentric to heliocentric. But that changed literally everything. And so if we're going to overcome confirmation bias, the Copernican principle reminds us that our own view seems right. It seems to be right at the center. It seems to be immovable until we are invited to see reality from a different perspective. Right? I mean, that's really what is necessary. I find it so helpful to think about the Copernican principle as it relates to, there are so many things that we believe are rock solid truth that are really not the truth. They're just our construction of what the truth is. Now, I don't know what, I'm not saying that there aren't absolutely true things. I think there really, really are. But if we can hold most things as we may be wrong, we may get introduced to a view that sheds even more light on the matter, right? We may come to a point where we change our minds on something, where we move from this way to that way, or, and this is maybe even bigger, where we don't change our minds, but we understand the other perspective. Because the point is not always to change your mind, right? We got to be able to hold on to some convictions. We have to be able to say, this is at the end of the day what I believe. But this is a painful but good example of when I was sitting with a couple of covenant pastors that are my just good friends, still are. And we the three of us got together to talk about the Bible and LGBTQ, theology. And we talked, and these two guys are traditional in their view. And they have great reasons for being traditional biblically. And as we were talking, I asked the question, I go, the thing that I'm most afraid of, if I stay in the covenant, this was a couple of years ago, is that you'll look at me not as if I just disagree on a debatable matter in the Bible, but you'll look at me and you won't respect my hermeneutic. You won't respect my view of the Bible as something you disagree with, but something that's permissible. And one of them looked at me, and you could tell it was hard for him to say this because I believe he still loves me. He goes, that's exactly what I believe. That your view is not permissible, that it's not. And I remember feeling like, how can I stay in fellowship with someone who won't even grant me the freedom in Christ to disagree? I know that's a weird story to tell. And that comes from my perspective. And I believe that, here's the thing, I believe those guys were totally loving, and they cared about me, and they were totally honest. They were being honest. And I'm grateful for that. But I also felt the pain of feeling like, if I can't be viewed as at least having a respected view, then I'm not sure that I can feel loved by these guys. Whew, it was tough. So, okay, I'm gonna ask for any comments, questions, reactions to that, the Copernican principle, or the story that I just shared.
It's like, if you don't have this absolute truth, this is my perspective, let me put it that way, then sometimes you're seen as wishy-washy. And I
Yes.
hate that. And I'm like, I'm not wishy-washy, but because I'm trying to include others or still trying to, add stuff, just that some people just think if that's true, you're wishy-washy. And kind of like you were saying, Steve, you wanted to be respected. And for me to feel wishy-washy, and people would say that to me, you're wishy-washy. And you just wanted to clock them. But it was just so hard for me to hear that because it made me like feel weak and small as opposed to, open and
Yeah.
eager. Anyway,
Thanks, Jim. I think that's a real, like, to be open-minded or willing to be wrong or so. Yeah, to be called wishy-washy. That's tough. Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Any other comments or noticings about just this idea of the Copernican principle, like putting ourselves in a frame of mind where we might be wrong?
I'm reminded, and this might be a helpful analogy for others, which is why I'm sharing it, but of just something that was really helpful at the onset of kind of my faith deconstruction was the notion of holding my beliefs with an open hand and learning how to hold my beliefs with an open hand, whereas the alternative is clenched fists, and how much more painful it is and almost impossible it is to come to a new view about anything when you have clenched fists.
Mm-hmm.
If all of your beliefs are in your hand and you're holding them like this, and reality or God or your neighbor or your family shows up and wants to make their way into those, how painful it is to have your hand like pried open.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're holding them with open hands already, and God, reality, your neighbor, family comes along, and looks like that's not the belief I have anymore. Okay, we'll put that off to the side. How much less painful that is. And just that posture of open-handedness. Or another helpful way I've found to think about it is like, I had a professor in college talk about like our belief systems can be like a backpack that we carry.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to learn how to see, you have to like open up the backpack and take things out of it.
Yeah. And
I think there's a lot of ways that our confirmation bias just tells us to like lock up the backpack, like, and actually put another backpack around that and put a lock on that one. And then like never touch it. But if we want to learn to see, we have to like take the lock off the backpack and open up the zipper and examine the things that are inside.
I like how you say that, Will, to hold it out here versus holding clenched fists, and to, have no locks on the backpacks. It reminds me of a thing that one of my mentors used to say is like, when we get real defensive about something, you have to ask the question or get triggered, or, when it comes to that belief, does it have you or do you have it? Mm-hmm. Meaning, like, can I hold it out here and examine it and look at it and see, oh, there's a flaw there. And, oh, well, that part's solid over here. Or am I so immersed in it, like in a snow globe, like living in a snow globe where I can't see anything else and I can't think anything else, then it has me. And I think that's the principle of detachment, where you can, open-handedness implies you can look at it and you can say, yeah, after further review, I really do believe that. Or, okay, I see where my belief has changed on that, Any other noticings or thoughts or questions about this idea of keeping the Copernican principle in mind?
Well, I was just thinking of the words even in your slide there, and the difference between reality or truth and perspective.
Yes.
That back in Copernicus' day, or before him, the fact was that everyone believed the world was flat.
Yep.
And so they thought that their perspective was reality or true. But it really was it was how they saw it. It was their perspective.
Yeah.
Common, but not
Yeah.
true.
Right.
And how often do we're searching for those people that agree with us so that we can confirm our perspective.
Yep.
And come to believe that that's true or reality, when really it's confirmation bias.
Yes. And it's so hard to see. There's a quote I'll share next week, but it's by this Harvard psychologist named Robert Keegan. And he said, the great embarrassment, and then he goes / or liberation of transformation is the moment when you realize what you thought was reality is only a construction of reality. And that's exactly what you just said.
Yep.
It's like, but can we be open enough to consider, that what we think is reality is really just our perspective? Because it probably is, and that doesn't mean that truth isn't real or there isn't truth. There is truth. And Copernicus proves it, and Ptolemy, there was still truth, just no one knew it yet, So.
Well, and all we really can see is our perspective.
Yes.
Literally,
yes.
That's all we can see.
Yes.
And when you talk about our perspective and the other side,
yep.
Well, we can't see the other side unless we actually move and go look at the other side and get a different perspective.
Reminds me, Pam, you've shared it before, but share your Carlson beach ball illustration. It's so good. It's so meaningful.
This goes back to some kind of leadership training at Carlson Companies, but we talked about those multicolored beach balls that are red, blue, yellow, green. Well, if I'm on this side, I say that is a yellow and green ball. But from your side, you're saying, are you nuts? It's a red and blue ball. Like, of course it is. And we could argue and argue until one of us goes to the other side and sees that, oh, okay, from your perspective, it really is. The truth is, it's whatever two colors on that side. So.
Mm-hmm. The truth is, it's whatever two colors on that side, and the truth is, you can only see part of it.
Yeah.
That's the truth too.
Yep.
It reminds me in a funny way of, remember a few years ago that stupid dress that was on the internet and it was like either blue or gold. Yeah. Remember that thing? It was like some people were convinced it was blue, other people, turns out it was blue, but some people really saw gold. And anyway, well, here's Brian McLaren again. The doorway out of confirmation bias is not argument, but imagination and experience. And, we all have a million stories where we've tried to reason our way through a debate with someone. And confirmation bias teaches us that there's no amount of reason. We think we're being completely reasonable with the person that doesn't agree with us. They think they're being completely reasonable. We're operating from two completely different set of facts, like blue and yellow and red and green. Mm-hmm. And so we'll just, if we keep arguing, we'll never get there. So here are, we just have a few minutes left, but I'm going to give some examples and then we can feedback on them. But here are some ideas for using your imagination and experience to break out of confirmation bias. Certainly, this is not comprehensive. Some of this is from Brian McLaren. Some of this is from my own experience. But I think when you start by simply trying to identify when you're experiencing confirmation bias, I think most of the time it's when you feel triggered, defensive, or angry. That's when you're seeing and you feel that it's red. It's red and green. No, it's yellow and blue. When you get into those weird arguments, when you get sucked into a Facebook battle storm, when you read a piece of news and you're like, no, that's not true. When you hear someone saying, so-and-so is an idiot. Yeah, they are. All that is. So if we can become conscious of when we're just seeing what we've always seen, and then Here's the thing. Sometimes when you feel triggered, defensive, or angry, you need to ask yourself if you have the energy in that moment to actually do the hard work of engaging compassionately. And I want to say it's okay if you don't. I want to say we don't always have the wherewithal, the emotional stability to our brains might be so hyper loaded, overloaded, or the kids have been screaming, we've gotten into a fight with someone, that it's just not the right time. I don't think it's always the right time to try to compassionately engage with your confirmation bias. Sometimes it's time to just say, there will be another chance. I think that's important. Because I
Can I
think,
just add?
yeah.
It occurs to me that it also would be nice if it was with a person that you have some investment with, some relationship, because you got a better shot at it.
Well, 100%. And thank you for saying that, Pam. It doesn't mean that someone's worthless or not, but there are certain people that you're just, you're not going to get anywhere with. And that's okay too. I think that's what you're saying. It's like when you're engaging with someone, it's helpful. I have a few friends right now that it's lovely. It's really good. We're going back and forth on things we disagree with, but it's based in trust, And so there's a back and forth and a mutual learning and an ability to say, well, hold on, I didn't quite get that, So I totally agree. Thanks for bringing that up, Pam. And then if you do have the energy to engage in an unfamiliar idea, maybe a conversation with someone or a film or a book, anything like that gets your brain doing the hard work of looking 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and you're experiencing the pain of processing. I think it's helpful to picture yourself watching from a safe distance versus feeling like you're being pulled underwater by an argument that you haven't yet agreed with. Do you know what I mean by that? Is that making sense to you guys? Like, that moment where you're like, oh, and you're trying so hard to learn, you're trying so hard to grow, but you're feeling like you don't have the time. It's just, you're getting sucked out in the undertow. If you can picture yourself actually watching this viewpoint from a distance, and even taking the time that you need to pause the movie, pause the book, pause the conversation, you're not going to get it all at once. And I think this is where, like, Rebecca, you kind of laughed about being the Enneagram 1, but the truth is we all want to get it right the first time when it comes to this stuff. This is so important. We want to expand, we want to learn, we want to grow, we want to understand the other. And like, that's not going to go well the first 10 times probably, and that's just reality. So, and then lastly, remember, and then let's feedback on it. Maybe you guys have some other ideas or some questions on it. We just have about 10 minutes left, but remember, the point isn't necessarily to change your mind. It's to understand more, right? Understand what you don't understand, see what you don't see. So that's why it's important to keep asking, what can't I see? What don't I know? And what do I need to see and know more? That's the point. The point is understanding perspective. You may be right, you may be wrong, you may change your opinion, you may not. The point is not to move over to their team, The point is to understand and learn and grow and see there might be some cracks in your belief system. And you might learn something about that person that you assumed was true, that even though they believe this, X, Y, Z about politics or religion, that they're not part of that one caricature that you had. You know what I mean by that? Like we think the other, like we get so offended when we get put into a caricature. Well, I'm not like those guys, but we expect everyone else on the other side to be exactly the same. All Trump supporters are exactly the same. All Democrats are exactly the same. Well, no, come on. All Christians are exactly the same. Well, of course not. right? So, okay, let's spend the next few minutes just sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, what sparked for you, um, what has helped you as it relates to getting over confirmation bias and moving toward inclusion. Answer any one of those questions that you find helpful, or make up your own question.
We have an environment now that we present ourselves in the social media, going back and forth, and where our opinion has to be, or we feel that we have to present our opinion or opposition immediately. And so, as you, I was thinking, as you talked about Copernicus, and he waited until he was going to die, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
Well, probably that's like today. I mean, if you had that controversial of a breakthrough, if you were to put that today and out there in the social media, how would that be accepted or blown up or torn apart? And even though the speed of communication was different back then, you read enough to know that the confrontation and the biases were no different than today.
Yeah.
And so you throw something out there like he did, all he wanted to do was duck. Right? So how many of us duck? How many of us say, I've got to make my point, I've got to be the smartest point? But what we don't do is listen and just say, okay, I hear what that person's saying. I have my own frame of reference. How does it lay together? And
Exactly.
that's so hard, especially in the environment we're in today.
Thanks for bringing that up, Will. I think it's really true that there is some weird pressure to respond immediately on things, to let people know immediately what you think. I think to your point, Will, it's like sometimes that's not the right move, you know? Listen instead of having to get your point out there. The world will survive without your point of view out in the world. And I'm an Enneagram 3, and I'm saying that. I love to get my point of view out in the world. What are some other observations, thoughts, ideas?
Well, there was a old quote from actually Kurt Vonnegut is where I heard it from before. If you're 70s people, maybe 80s too, but he said you can explain away all mistakes in human history with one simple sentence, and that's it seemed like a good idea at the time. And that's the Copernican, all theories, all scientific theories that become debunked seem like a good idea at the time. And a lot of our personal thoughts, with the limited information that we have at our hands, seem like really good ideas at the time. And then they get blown up by personal experiences, usually a relationship type of thing where you get to know someone and all of a sudden it's all blown up.
Yeah.
But it's that challenge place of seemed like a good idea at the time.
You're so right, Steve. Totally. And if we can just remember that, we can kind of laugh at ourselves, like how silly. But
that makes me think about what's at stake. I go back to Copernicus. The people that thought the earth was flat were fine. Like it didn't change reality.
Right.
They were fine, and they were fine in their relationships with the people around them. But what's at stake when you challenge the norm? I mean, it doesn't really change the reality, but it changes the relationships, or it potentially harms all the relationships. So it's not that we shouldn't seek truth or a different perspective, but boy, the timing of that is critical when you think about what's at stake in terms of relationship.
And you're really right about that. Our social systems fight to stay in harmony, and we don't like disagreement. And we do like to scapegoat, so I think we need to be very tender and careful about those relationships. And it's not always the right time to say something. Sometimes it is, but not always. What else?
I've been listening and hearing a lot of this tonight, kind of through the lens of the faith that I grew up in, which was a lot of super spirituality. It was a very charismatic evangelical faith, and specifically this third bullet point. There was always that slippery slope if you question things and that kind of thinking. And so that third bullet point kind of, not that I even believe that anymore. I don't. Yeah. But that third bullet point lands just like in a particular place for me that like, yeah, like I love that idea of picturing myself from a safe distance versus like, I'm just gonna be pulled under and then I won't know what I think anymore. And like, I don't know. I even still need to sort that out in my head a little bit, but yeah. It just that old kind of way of thinking it, it feels like comforting to like picture it that way, or to think of it that way is a good reframe.
Well, and isn't that a helpful thing to when we think about our old systems, that maybe they didn't say everything right, but there was some good stuff in there, like, it wasn't all bad. If you reframe it, oh, maybe that's what they were talking about, anyway, not even saying that's what you were saying necessarily, Rebecca, but that's what it made me think of. Okay. Anyone else?
Thanks for sharing your story earlier. And I'm sorry that you've held that. That sounds like it was really hard with your friends and not being able to be who you were and ask the questions that you wanted to ask and be loved in that freedom. So thanks for doing that.
Thanks, Joan.
And the thing that I think of, Rebecca, was what a couple of you have said is the pause. Then I'm hopefully acknowledging God's spirit to say, tell me what I don't see. Is there a third way that I'm not seeing? And that having that silence is a good thing. It's that, it's detachment, just all those kind of things. Because I'm God's, I'm with the spirit in it, and I can trust him to tell me my next right thing.
Wow. Thank you, Joan. That's beautiful.
So I keep coming back to what Will said about holding my hands open instead of holding my hands closed. And I know he said like, oh, I can pick things out of mine. And I think about having a conversation with someone, and like sometimes as the conversation goes, we want to like, okay, I want to bring mine over here, and maybe like you'll follow me and kind of see my hands closing up. But I think it's like I want to know that it's okay for you as I'm having a conversation to see mine.
Yeah.
And I want to see what's in yours too. I feel like is the place where I'm trying to get with these conversations, right? Like because I think it's always been like, well, I've been around all the people who we've all had the same things in our hands and they were like this. So we all had them. We all knew we had them right here.
Yeah.
But I don't want to always be around people that have the same thing right here. I want to see what's there in mine and see what looks different in yours, and what do I think about that? Like,
yeah, I like that, Enoch. I like that as a desire.
Yeah,
that's really good. I like that.
Yeah, and so thank you, Will, for that visual. Like, it's good to remember. Open.
Yeah.
So.
Anyone else?
I kind of want to say something, but I also am aware that it's 8:30.
Go ahead, Andy.
Okay, so this is not going to be phrased well, so you're welcome. I think so. To go back to Copernicus and the flat Earth versus, flat Earth or geocentric or heliocentric or whatever, like he finally said, like, nope, you're wrong. And like we said earlier, it turns out it did change a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
To bring that idea to today, to say like, hey, you may believe this and you're wrong.
Yeah.
Like, because I think that still has to happen, right? Like in looking historically, like voting rights, like owning people based on a skin color was flat wrong, whether anybody believed it or not. Like that was the held belief, it was wrong, that needs to be dismantled.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think like how is that even possible anymore to do?
Yeah.
Like, with because literally pick an issue, it's going to be divisive,
Yep.
and you're going to pick a fight. And so how do you do that anymore? How do you listen and say, okay, you're wrong and you need to be taken down? Like,
yeah,
like I don't know, maybe this is like the feisty whatever rage inside of me still, but like, I don't know, at times, like maybe it just, like, I want to say like, sure, yeah, respect and love everybody, but also maybe not. Like maybe I think you're wrong and you need to be taken down and I do not respect you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I don't know. Like I'm sure I'm all just like fired up on my own, like,
I love it.
clearly I'm right side of things. But it's like when you see something truly wrong, systematically wrong, like when do you find this isn't the question I want to ask, but it's like, is it worth listening if you know it needs to be destroyed?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not phrasing it right, but it's like, I don't know.
Andy, if I might hop in,
Yes.
it sounds like you're asking more of a question about like about boundaries of engagement and like almost like what is permissibly disagreeable and what is just I won't abide a discussion.
Right.
Yeah. And I think like that's I mean I would say that's like a normal thing for every person to have, is like here's the thing I will and will not engage with. Like I'm not going to go on to 4chan message boards to try and understand the position of white supremacists. I'm just not going to do that. Right?
Yep.
But there might be a position that's more mainstream that I should try and seek to understand. I don't know if that helps at all, but I think like having some sort of limit to what you can and can't like tolerate, I guess is normal. I don't know, because then otherwise you'd just be nonstop engagement with every abhorrent thing there is.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I also hear you saying, Andy, or asking, is there ever a time where you just say no? I mean, this is wrong, and there is right and wrong. And I think, there's historical figures who have done that really, really well. I think Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and Gandhi, and it seems like, not to be cheesy, but like the Jesus way of non-violently resisting evil seems to be the way. Now, I don't know how to do that, but even the little story about Jesus in John 9, he disappears from the whole story. He's out. He doesn't have any conversations with the religious leaders. He's out. He's gone. He just, the next time you see him, he's outside of the camp talking to the guy that gets excommunicated, and he wants nothing to do with that. So I think there is room and time, for those kinds of statements, for sure. There has to be, or else history doesn't change, so I don't think it's either or. I think it's that's a nuance of the conversation that that is super important. I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, I'm not answering you the point is not to answer you. I know that, but I want to really honor the sentiment because you're really right on the money, you know?
I think too, Andy, you're kind of getting at a point that's touched on a lot in the biblical prophets. And it's that like I think often like when we're talking about confirmation bias and things, we're talking like, it can seem like, well, the truth is, it's not conservative or liberal, it's centrist. Like the truth is always going to be centrist or something. But like biblically speaking, when it comes to the prophets, like when they talk about truth, it's like there is justice and there is injustice. And God wants what is just and what is righteous. And like what is just and righteous might be conservative sometimes, and it might be liberal sometimes, and it might be centrist sometimes. And like that's going to vary, and it's not always going to be like whatever centrist, just pick it.
Well, you guys, such good conversation. I want to respect our time, and we're a little over time. And so next week, we'll continue the conversation on inclusion and confirmation bias by talking about the idea of including and transcending. And so this is the idea of developing and expanding without losing what you've left, but while embracing more and more and seeing more and more, and how to do that philosophically and tangibly. It'll be fun. So next week, 7:00, we'll be back on the Zooms. If you can make it, awesome. If not, we'll record it. Can I pray for us as we peace out, you guys? God, thank you for thank you for inviting us to have these kinds of conversations, these rich, expansive, hard, good conversations. Thanks for the mutual respect and dialogue. Thanks for where you're leading us. We want to follow towards a more just future. And show us how to do that. Show us what we don't see. Show us what we can't see so that we can see more and know more. And we rely on your Spirit to guide us in that way. Amen. All right, people. Good to be with you all. Really appreciate each of you taking the time to hang out. See you next week or sooner.